Welcome to the Flynn Brothers podcast. I'm John.
And I'm Jimmy. Today's big idea, NorCal versus SoCal.
We discuss living our entire lives in different parts of California, then draw some dividing lines like the cartographers of old.
Later, we deep dive a variety of categories, pitting NorCal against SoCal to figure out which Cal reigns supreme.
Finally, Jimmy is going to test my knowledge of the Golden State with a little California quiz.
It's all coming up. But first, here's the band everyone in California loves, the Solons.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, we're talking about California today, NorCal versus SoCal. And I think it's going to be a hella good podcast. What do you think, buddy?
Can't wait to talk about the Golden State.
Yeah, so we've lived in California our entire lives. We had our childhood and spent our formative years in Sacramento. Then we both headed down south a little bit to the Bay Area for college. We were in the South Bay there at Santa Clara. And then we've spent our adulthood down here in Los Angeles. We keep kind of moving south down California. I wonder where will we end up next? Mexico, perhaps.
Baja,
some fish tacos. Before we get into kind of our breakdown of the different categories, NorCal versus SoCal, etc., I think it's important we draw some boundaries like the cartographers of old. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, it sounds familiar from the
Well,
intro.
if you were listening closely to our intro, you heard that turn of phrase. But, you know, something I noticed, like when you Google NorCal and SoCal and the borders, NorCal, they put almost down to like San Luis Obispo. Like basically looking at it like longitudinally, you would think, oh, Northern California is like 80% of California, right? And then they have like the bottom 20% or so is Southern California. But we were discussing how we don't really feel that way. We don't really feel there's a fairness to that. And we kind of like dividing California sort of into three sections, right?
Yeah, there's a northern and then there's central, which for the most part is where a lot of just like food is grown. And I'd say
Right.
San Luis Obispo is almost a perfect mix between Northern
Yes.
California and Southern California. But yes, Northern California I think is quite distinct from Central California, which is quite distinct from Southern California.
So geographically, NorCal basically starts at the very top of California and then goes to, what would you say, like the Bay Area, kind of South Bay is sort of the bottom of Northern California.
Yeah, like San Jose, roughly.
Right. So Northern California, the major cities, we would include our hometown, Sacramento. We'd include San Francisco, Berkeley, Oakland. San Jose, like you said, is at the bottom. And, you know, to sort of generalize this area of California, to sort of stereotype, we talked about it a bit in the, you know, Anthony Bourdain versus Guy Fieri podcast, Guy Fieri being from Santa Rosa, which is in NorCal. We talk about how Northern California is a little more hippie, a little more granola.
There's the protests movements going on. You're
Right.
gonna have backyard dinner parties where somebody might say something like, "We need to cut the Gordian knot that is the California Constitution." They're usually very highly educated, and perhaps the other side of that is then there's a bit of maybe pretentiousness, a little bit of elitistness, the type of critiques you would maybe have of academia.
And I think that's specific to the Bay Area. And then you kind of get north of Sacramento. It's pretty rural north of Sacramento up to Oregon. It's a little more, that's kind of where they've talked about like, ooh, should we secede and be the state of Jefferson? And that's a little more country folk, if you will.
Yeah, I go to a camp pretty much every year up there, and you would not know that you are in California when you're driving on them back roads up there. It's good old fashioned rural America. And I think too that people just forget that that's up there.
Right.
Like they just don't really pay attention. There's also Humboldt. But yeah, I think it's extremely foresty and rural, and the Northern California that we think of is a bit lower.
And then Central California, we would kind of say, is from sort of the South Bay, San Jose, to about Bakersfield, like kind of right before the Grapevine, which for those who don't know, the Grapevine is the winding, twisting, depending which way you're going, massively ascending or massively descending road that kind of leads you into Los Angeles County and like down into the valley when you get into Los Angeles. So we're kind of calling this Central California. You talked about how that's where a lot of the agriculture is. Anyone who's ever driven Interstate 5, you can basically drive in Central California for like 20 straight miles without having to touch your steering wheel. It's just flat, straight, a lot of agriculture, a lot of cows, Harris ranches in there. So everyone who's driven past knows you roll up your windows and you circulate the air in your car, because when you drive past Harris Ranch, which has thousands of defecating cows, it's going to stink, especially on a summer day.
And you follow that up by stopping at In-N-Out and eating beef.
Yeah. And then the cognitive dissonance, you're just like, goodbye.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of crops, avocados, grapes.
And then the cities you've got
walnuts,
are Stockton and Fresno as well are in there, which are, fine towns, but not really in our purview. They're not entering the debate. They're sort of bystanders in this great battle between Northern.
Well,
and Southern
Stockton
California.
technically would be in Northern California
Consider
based
it
on our.
Northern California, I guess so.
It's Northern California, yeah. That's clearly an error. We'll have to talk to our research department. But Fresno certainly counts, as do the aforementioned Bakersfield and San Luis Obispo. So then Southern California, if we're drawing lines, it basically goes from the Grapevine to the border between California and Mexico. And then stereotypically, when you think of Southern California, you think of the beach, you think of sort of materialistic people trying to advance in the film and television world. You think of palm trees, sunshine, and
Deserts.
and basically the two main
ocean.
Basically, the two main metropolises are L.A. and San Diego. Are there any other kind of major cities?
No, but I think one thing to keep in mind if people haven't been to Los Angeles recently is that Los Angeles is massive
Yes.
and stretches in every direction. And even when you've technically got into other cities, like Los Angeles itself is huge. And then outside of Los Angeles, there are these satellite cities around
Right.
Los Angeles so you can drive for almost like 2.5 hours through cities.
At
And,
least, at least. Yeah, I think, you have the Valley, which people have heard of, and then all the beach communities on the coast, right, the western coast, and then more kind of like southern, like underneath LA, and then, San Diego's also an absolutely huge city. So
Yeah.
whereas NorCal has kind of 4 or 5 bigger mid-major cities, down in Southern California, it's just 2 massive cities, basically.
Yeah, and I'd say that you pretty much must have a car to get around
Yes.
Southern California,
Yeah.
where there is I think things are a little bit denser, perhaps up in Northern California, and the rail system is a little better. You can get around with a bike on the trains.
But yeah, California is huge. You compare it to the East Coast. I was looking at a map, and California from north to south basically equals 8 states on the East Coast, and I'll name them for you: Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware, Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. And you think about all those states, very, very different in terms of diversity, in terms of politics, in terms of cuisine, in terms of culture. And, like Pennsylvania is very different from Georgia, right? And very, very far northern California is very different from very, very, very far southern California, right? So I think that's kind of what we've always loved about California and living in the different parts, is just how diverse and unique its different parts are.
I think, the national conversation, it gets stereotyped as one way, and really there are every single type of person in California, and it really, I think, is like the state that is perhaps the most of a microcosm of the entire United States.
And I think in some of our research online, I didn't jot this in, but California, if you count it as its own nation, it would rank like top 5 economy, like worldwide, of all the nations. So it is like there is a certain elitism that California exudes that I think a lot of the other states find annoying. Like, I know my girlfriend has, family that lives on the East Coast. A lot of them just have zero interest in visiting California and just have kind of like a poor view of the state, which fair enough. Like, there's reasons to have a poor view of the state. But I think from us, obviously our biased point of view, living here, we've really enjoyed it, and we're really excited to talk about the differences.
I think the final point I'll make on it is it truly does earn its name of the Golden State.
Yeah.
It is a land that was flush with gold after these pioneers made the trek all the way across. Like, you couldn't have imagined a more fertile, wealth-giving land than California to get at the end of the Oregon Trail. And, obviously there were people before the Americans who arrived here, but it's kind of like one of the last places where, like, conventional Western civilization settled. Like, it's like the last edge of the map that people got to.
There's very much the American dream, and then inside of that, there's the California dream.
Yeah.
Even though sometimes for us, it's been at times a nightmare. Too dark. All right, fine. Too dark.
They didn't really mean it. I think he just wanted the turn of phrase.
Folks. Sorry, I'm a slave to fanciful language.
No
all
need
right,
to call any hotlines.
More seriously, when we come back, we're going to discuss NorCal versus SoCal in 5 different categories. Right after this. Well, we had HR reach out, and I just want to clarify, the old nightmare thing. It's fanciful language, I'm just trying to be clever and fanciful.
He's a literary man.
All right, let's get into it. So our first category where we will compare NorCal versus SoCal is food. Food, which to us, perhaps the most important thing in life.
I don't think any listener is surprised that we're starting with food.
No, not at all. So let's start with Northern California. Is it fair to say that Northern California is better from the lens of someone who prefers to cook rather than eat?
Yes.
Is that fair?
I would say the ingredients are not only fresher, but they are cheaper.
Yeah.
I think the farmer's market is at its truest expression of self in Northern California, in that it is farmers coming together for a market and not these sort of extraneous things that have been added onto it with like crafts or vintage clothes or even like ready-made food trucks, which isn't really the true spirit of a farmer's market. A farmer's market is a place that you go to buy produce directly from a farmer.
And I think when we moved down to Southern California, there's a lot of people who come from all over the nation and come to Southern California, and they're like, man, the produce here is so incredible, if they're from Minnesota or whatever. But we are so snobbish. We're from Northern California, so when we came to like the farmers markets and the grocery stores moving down here in LA, we were like, this is like kind of subpar compared to the ingredients and the produce we were used to in Northern California.
Particularly Sacramento, which christened itself, I think rightly, America's farm-to-fork capital.
Yeah.
Something that was of much scrutiny because its prior nickname had been the City of Trees, which it also is, but there are over 20 other cities of trees.
Including, is Paris one, or is that the City of Lights?
I think they're both. Anyway, there are cities of lights and trees. Trees and lights and lights and trees. I think Sacramento is the best place to buy produce in all of California from the standpoint that it is the central city in a sea of some of the best farmland in the entire world.
Right.
Which just really rich soil.
You jotted down some statistics from the California Department of Food and Agriculture. Now, this pertains to all of California, but it's important to note that most of these stats will kind of pertain to Northern California.
Yeah. So there are over 400 crops grown in California, which is over a third of the country's vegetables and over 3/4 of the country's fruits and nuts, which I think is forgotten when people talk about California, particularly in like a political context, like freeloaders, and it's all these big city liberals and things like that. It's like all the fruit and vegetables and nuts that you eat, my friend, are mostly coming from California.
A lot of the people making those criticisms probably aren't huge fans of fruits and vegetables. But even still, so we talk about Northern California as a great place to cook. It is, I will say, a great place to eat. Now, Sacramento does have some good restaurants, but I think especially one of the great all-time food cities in the entire world is San Francisco. San Francisco, when I think of it, I think of incredible Chinese food and Italian food, especially Chinese food. I mean, you compare like Chinatown, San Francisco to Chinatown, Los Angeles, and it's just ridiculous how much better San Francisco is.
It's like a street in Los Angeles. Like
Whereas
a couple blocks.
It's a true chunk of the city in San Francisco, and there's really great bakeries and pastries. Tartine is that started in San Francisco. They're world famous. And, I think the big thing, too, is, you mentioned California growing the majority of certain crops. You got to talk about Napa and wine. And I think California, in terms of all the wine the United States California produces like 90% of it, and most of that is in Northern California, like Napa, Sonoma, these types of places. So, when you talk about like the crops, and if you like to cook and you sort of consume food in that sense, you got to give the edge, I would say, to NorCal, right?
Absolutely. I think NorCal, too, is the king of the backyard feast. Like,
Yes.
there's so many dinner parties growing up.
Yeah.
We would go over to somebody's house and you would eat outside. The weather is quite temperate. Usually it's not too hot. If it is
Yeah.
hot, it cools off sort of in the evening. And it's just a really wonderful place if you have a curiosity for food, and you really want to work with the top ingredients, like all chefs kind of encourage you to do, to get the best locally sourced ingredients. You really can't get better than Northern California.
Well, let's look at Southern California, because if Northern California is better if you like to cook, one could argue Southern California is better if you like to eat. And we really found that to be the case here in Los Angeles. As great of a food city as San Francisco is, like, we've been to New York, been to Rome, like we haven't been to Paris, we haven't been to every single Tokyo, we haven't been to every single great food city in the world, but Los Angeles, I would put up against any of them. And it's because of not only the diversity of like types of restaurants in terms of cuisine, but also just styles of restaurants, classic restaurants that have been around over 100 years, the trendiest restaurants that are, at the forefront of these culinary movements. It is just such a rich place, and you could get any type of food and the highest possible level of that food at a restaurant in Los Angeles.
And often from some of the most unexpected places possible.
Yeah.
There are countless great restaurants that are in dingy storefronts in strip malls
Yeah.
that you would never think to enter.
No.
And you go inside and it's like almost like walking onto a set occasionally.
Yeah.
And some of that is like, sometimes it's manufactured. And I think Los Angeles is also guilty of perhaps playing to a brunch crowd that
Yes.
prefers ambiance over quality of food, but that should not take away from the many, many places that are fantastic and just transformative once you walk inside, despite a very humble storefront. And also, it has so many Al Pastor roadside tents where there
Yes.
are these towering cones of marinated pork being roasted Euro style, these flames, and these gentlemen or ladies slicing off these paper thin little bits and putting it into a freshly made taco from masa that they just scooped out with their hand and slapped on a flat top grill, and then they do a little flick and they take the pineapple off the top. I mean, I think that just being as commonplace as it is, yet totally remarkable, is, I think, very emblematic of what Los Angeles offers.
And you could drive, like I was driving through Long Beach, and I couldn't drive more than 500 feet without encountering one of those taco stands. And it really is just incredible. They're all great. They're all super authentic. And
All homemade salsas,
Yes.
homemade meats, everything is totally from scratch, and the prices are out of this world.
yeah, it's funny when people come from other places to Los Angeles. Like if you come from the South or New York, and come from the South, it's like, oh, you can't get good fried chicken in Los Angeles. Or you come from New York, oh, you can't get good bagels in Los Angeles. It's like, yeah, well, like our Mexican food is better like at a taco stand than you could have anywhere else, right? And then I think on the other side of it, that's, you kind of look at the more high-end restaurants. There's all these celebrity chefs, right? Like Wolfgang Puck has Spago, and there's Nobu, which is really famous for the sushi. And then you have a lot of modern chefs, you'll see on the Food Network, like Antonio Lafaso, the Voltaggio brothers. We love brothers.
Oh, yeah.
And, anyone you see on the Food Network, they tend to have a restaurant here in L.A. It could be close to set. But as you said, like these strip mall establishments, like we live pretty close to Thai Town, and you can just get great, great, authentic Thai food. Koreatown has unbelievable Korean food. Little Armenia, spoiler alert, great Armenian food. And, but I think what we really love about Los Angeles is the classic restaurants. So one of our favorites is Philippe the Original, which has been around, I think, over 100 years, and they claim to have invented the French dip sandwich. There's another place called Cole's, which is also downtown, that claims it, but Philippe generally seen as the better place. Really iconic place to go before a Dodger game. They just have incredible French dip sandwiches. Even for someone who's not a big roast beef guy, Philippe's is the best.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then there's also, of course, Musso and Frank Grill on Hollywood, the sleaziest street in perhaps the entire world, and the nicest restaurant you could possibly imagine. famously depicted in countless movies.
Ocean's
and
11,
shows.
Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Yeah, tons of movies
On and on.
shows.
And when you walk in there, you do feel like $1 million. I've seen a red-faced and satisfied Jerry O'Connell walking out of there. Like there are celebrities who sit at the table. They'll tell you, oh, this is where the Rolling Stones sit, or this is where Orson Welles sits, and you do feel folded in to history. We just watched the Masters the other day, like Augusta Golf Course. There are these certain places that have a magic about them, and I think almost Musso and Frank is like the Augusta Golf Course. If you have restaurants, like if you love golf, you love Augusta. If you love food, you love Musso and Frank.
And, you know, the thing that does bug us about Los Angeles is we'll see certain restaurants and we'll call them sets, where it's sort of like, oh, look, the set designer came in and constructed what they think their idea of a, 20th century Italian restaurant in New York looks like, right? And so you'll go to the place, and the food's okay, but people are really going for the atmosphere. They're going to take the Instagram photo, and, these places will have like a viral dish. So that's a little bit the more annoying end of the Los Angeles restaurant spectrum.
But at the same time, they are some really great ambiance. Like if you love ambiance, you love things being fancy and they look nice to take a photo in front of, this is also your place for sure.
And then we'd be remiss if we didn't mention San Diego. When I think of San Diego, I think of like fish tacos. That's kind of the main thing I think of. They have pretty good food down there. I haven't been down there a ton and eaten a ton, but I think, again, it's like a lot of good Mexican food, particularly the proximity to the ocean. You can get good seafood, but, not on the same level as a Los Angeles or San Francisco. But still, hey, I think San Diego invented the California burrito, and anyone who puts French fries in a burrito, you're okay with me. All right, well, let's break it down and pick a winner here. NorCal versus SoCal food. Who you got as the winner?
I'm taking Northern California. I'm partial to it as somebody who likes to cook. It drives me nuts not being able to have a good farmer's market. I used to literally live 1 block away from one that was underneath the freeway in Sacramento that had every type of fruit and vegetable you could possibly imagine. And, it's got a soft spot for me being a NorCal Sacramento boy. I just love having that variety of food.
Yeah, Los Angeles, I would say, is slightly better of a food city than San Francisco, but they're comparable. But what I don't find comparable is the amount of ingredients and fresh produce and level of cooking like you'll see from the average person in Northern California versus the average person in Southern California. So I think I'm going to lean NorCal too for food. So we'll have Will keep score. That's going to be 2 points for Northern California, or maybe because we're probably going to disagree, right?
Let's
if we
point
split
each.
votes, we'll do 1 point each. All right, so we got 2 points for NorCal so far, and that means we can move on to our next category: nature/weather. We kind of group these two together. This is sort of, I guess, the Lord Almighty is sort of in charge of this one, huh?
There are subtle differences, but I would say California in general is characterized by having the Mediterranean climate. You've got sort of warmer and rainy winters. They're not having a ton of snow unless you're getting up into high altitudes or high latitudes, if you will. Yeah. And you have sort of hot and dry summers, and the rain is frequent, and it can kind of, down in Los Angeles, I'd say it pours more, while in Northern California, I'd say it sometimes gets a little bit more misty and foggy.
It's steady. Yeah, it depends where you are. In the Bay, there's kind of a constant mist, whereas, Sacramento will be like a steady rain. But, Los Angeles, just not a very well-situated city for rain, so they'll have kind of flash floods, and the streets will get kind of crazy. But let's break it down by region. So NorCal, when you think of kind of the topography, is that fair to say? We're using a lot of kind of map terms, the sort of the topographical features. You think of, with Northern California, Lake Tahoe is really what comes to mind, right? So you think of the beautiful blue lake, you think of the nice trees. I think, when you think of the Bay Area, nature-wise, there's not a ton to love. I mean, there's Golden Gate Park, but it's pretty urbanized. It's pretty industrial. Like San Francisco is beautiful in sort of that man-made admiration of architecture sort of way, but you're not like, I need to like escape to the nature of San Francisco. But below that, you got Monterey and Santa Cruz and areas like that. And then, as we said, in far, far Northern California, forests.
And Sacramento did lots of oaks, and where I'd say San Francisco is kind of more characterized by like these eucalyptus type trees. I do think Golden Gate Park is huge. I think that's something that's pretty remarkable considering how small San Francisco is, and is such a necessary part of that city. Otherwise, it would be kind of choked in with how urban it is. But yeah, I think you've pretty much summed it up right.
The weather in Sacramento, it's pretty mild except for the summer. The summers are brutal. They often get 100 plus in the summer. San Francisco's cold all year round. I believe it was Mark Twain who once said, the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. And it's true. There's a bit of an inconsistency, right, between the two places. Tahoe has very nice weather. But I think for us, the best weather we've ever experienced, I know it's crazy talking about this because we live in Los Angeles. For us, it was in college at Santa Clara. The South Bay's weather was just perfect. I mean, what do you think made it so perfect?
It's the proximity to the San Francisco Bay without being right next to it. So it doesn't really get socked in all day with fog. There are certain sections of San Francisco that are literally just foggy all the time. Whereas the South Bay, you'd get that fog to drift down, but the sun is hot enough to where it's basically burning off by about 11.
Yeah.
And so you get these beautiful days in the 70s and 80s. And then at night, the fog comes back, which cools everything back down again. So when you're wanting to be out and about, it's nice. When you're kind of wanting to be sort of cozy or you're waking up in the morning, it's nice and chilly and sort of atmospheric.
For a couple of fellas in college, being outside on a weekend with an adult beverage, sitting out in the beautiful weather, life didn't get much better than that.
I would describe it as you almost feel as though you don't have skin. That's how good the weather is.
Sensory deprivation tank.
Yeah.
Very cool.
You can't even feel hot, cold. It's just the perfect temperature.
Yeah. Well, let's move to SoCal. So Southern California is considered to have some of the best weather anywhere. Everyone says how great the weather is in Los Angeles and San Diego, and I really don't think it can be overstated. I mean, most days it is about 70 to 75. It's, you can pretty much wear any type of outfit you want and you will be comfortable. I would say the nature is interesting because, very generally you think of the beach, right? You think of the beach, but there's also areas like Death Valley, Joshua Tree that have these very interesting, almost alien-like landscapes. So I think, depending if that's kind of your jam, that is pretty cool and worth seeing at least once in your lifetime.
Yeah, very deserty as opposed to Northern California, which in addition to Lake Tahoe also obviously has the Yosemite Valley, which is a stunning cathedral of God's creation, as John Muir once said. So I think that Northern California, I think, has these more like classic what you think of when you think of going out into nature. Whereas when you're in Southern California, it's like, am I on Mars?
Right.
Areas.
You found a nice quote here from the late, great David Lynch, who had moved to Los Angeles after being in Philadelphia. You want to go ahead and read this Lynch quote for us?
Yes. To give us a little bit of context, the sun feels different in Los Angeles in a sort of ineffable way. It comes out 292 days a year, which is pretty remarkable. And this is how Lynch described what I am trying to get at in that ineffability. I arrived in LA at night, so it wasn't until the next morning when I saw this light, and it thrilled my soul. I felt lucky to live with that light. The light is inspiring and energizing. Even with the smog, there's something about that light that's not harsh, but bright and smooth. It fills me with the feeling that all possibilities are available. I don't know why. It's different from the light in other places.
It's true, man. He mentions the smog and, hazardous for our health. It does make it even more beautiful. Like in Los Angeles when it's sunrise or sunset, even on one of our favorite movies, the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood poster, you can see the smog line. Yeah, you can see the haze. And there is, it makes it look very cinematic and very beautiful, gauzy, dreamy. And it is pretty incredible. I will say, one of the things that's a little tougher down here is the humidity. It's a lot more humid in Southern California versus Northern California, especially Sacramento, Central Valley. There's kind of more that dry heat, right? So it can be 100 degrees and super hot. And you feel like your skin's burning. But I would almost prefer that to 87 and super humid, right? Where you feel like, oh my God, I have that feeling where I come out of a shower and I can't dry off. I just hate that feeling sometimes.
Yeah, it's just sticky and you can't get away from it. And Northern California has trees which offer shade.
Yes.
And Los Angeles has devoted itself to the very picturesque yet shadeless palm tree in many places.
Which rats can nest in, it's worth mentioning.
They also go up like a match, as we saw, sadly.
That's true. All right, time to declare a winner. Nature/weather. NorCal versus SoCal. Who you got?
NorCal.
You going
I
NorCal?
like
Okay.
NorCal. I think
For-
it's
okay.
I think in terms of I love Sacramento even in the heat of the day. Yeah, I love a good hot day in Sacramento. I love the South Bay. I think has the best weather all around. So
Yeah.
I'm giving it to NorCal.
I'm going to be a naughty little fella here, and I am going to split my vote. I'm going to give half a point to NorCal for the nature and half a point to SoCal for the weather.
Wow.
Is that allowed?
Who cares? We're making up the rules.
Will
as we
says
go.
yes. Will says yes. I'm going to go with Will. All right, so we got
Half to 2.
SoCal has got half a
3.5.
point, and NorCal has 3.5. And hopefully, hey, SoCal, got to bring it after the break. Okay, next category, people. The people of NorCal versus the people of SoCal. Sounds like a court case, doesn't it?
Yeah, where one side of the state is litigating against the other.
Who's the defendant? Who knows? All right, let's start with NorCal. The people in NorCal, how would you describe generally the people in Northern California?
If we're taking the good, I'd say very friendly, down to earth, and there's a sort of humility / gratitude. Gratitude in that you are living in one of the great places, one of the great states, and humility in that you're not Southern California, which gets all of the attention.
Right. And, Northern California is considered sometimes or Sacramento in particular is considered the Midwest of California. And I think that's very true. You go on a walk, everyone says hi to you. Everyone is very, very friendly. At the grocery store, people are chatty, people are kind of folksy and making jokes. And, I think in comparison to where we live now, Los Angeles, there's, the critique, people live in apartment buildings for 10 years and they haven't met any of their neighbors, right? And that just would not happen in Sacramento, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think people nod at you on the sidewalk, whereas a frequent occurrence that happens to me in Los Angeles is I will step out of the way on a sidewalk for people walking two abreast to let them go by, and they look away from me as if I am not there, or I am
Push their AirPods in deeper into their ears.
And perhaps I'm a very threatening gentleman, as you may,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
see me, you're a little bit afraid.
You're pretty ripped,
I'm
and,
ripped.
I
I
never
look
know.
tough.
Yeah, you
but
look
yeah,
tough,
no, I think that's my take on it as well. And I think there is this sort of rural tilt, particularly to Sacramento,
Yeah.
that you don't necessarily get down in SoCal. Though as you get further out and kind of out into the outskirts of SoCal, you can find that.
I think you talk about other parts of Northern California besides Sacramento, though, like Bay Area, Berkeley, a lot of weirdos, a lot of eccentrics. San Jose, you got a lot of very introverted tech people, not the biggest fans of eye contact and social cues and such. And San Francisco, it's a big city, so it's just kind of a mixed bag in terms of the people. A little hard to generalize, but I think,
although you could say there are the titans of the software industry.
yes, I would say that's kind of the more negative side of the
Yeah.
people in Northern California, especially in kind of these tech hubs. Is there's this elitist sort of anti-human, the income inequality is pretty grotesque in San Francisco. And, I think with Stanford, Berkeley, there's, as you alluded to earlier, kind of that pretentiousness in academia and just, it's very, inbred and, territorial and
perhaps a bit abstract and detached from some
Yes.
of the real life realities.
yes. And, people can kind of be judgmental. And it's just, I think really the big thing is just all these tech guys. And, we've seen kind of the consequences of these tech giants pursuing greed and, pursuing progress at all costs. And I do think you have to mention that, though, when you're sort of speaking about the types of people there are in Northern California.
Yeah, if you were going to accuse them of being disingenuous, you could say that every single tech company basically started with, we're trying to save the world, and have now basically thrown that on the wayside if it gets in the way of making profits.
Well, let me ask you this. Who sort of summarizes Northern California? Who would you say is Northern California's god, if you will? Take a sec to kind of give it a good think. Who would you say is the god, the sort of person that kind of captures all the cross sections of the Venn diagram?
Right. Well, I'd have to go with one of our favorite gentlemen, Guy Fieri.
Guy Fieri, Santa Rosa's own Guy Fieri. Yeah, I think it's true. I think, we mentioned in the episode where we talk about him and Bourdain, there's the trashiness element, there's the friendliness element. There's not too much AI anti-humanness with Guy Fieri.
There is this simultaneous appreciation and knowledge with also a very down-to-earth self, which I think, and there's he's not trying to be cool based on what is trendy. He is expressing himself, which is crazy that Guy's expression of self comes out in the way that it does through his sartorial choices. But yeah, I think he's just very true to himself, very down to earth, very knowledgeable, and gets along with lots of people, which I think the diversity that you find in Northern California breeds an ability to get along in a variety of different situations.
All right, the people of SoCal, I think we'd be remiss if we did not mention many of the people in Los Angeles and San Diego, but many of the people in Los Angeles are some of the most beautiful people on earth. And I mean that in the most superficial physical attractiveness sense of the term. I mean, we've taken writing classes and we've come across actors and models and stuff and just living in Los Angeles, and you just see some really, really striking people of all types.
Absolutely. A lot of people, I think, come originally with the little, hey, maybe I could get a little commercial work, or I could get on a TV show or something like that. And I've worked on some sets as a teleprompter operator, and you would be astonished not just by how good looking some famous people are when you see them up close, but also lighting guys, or just grit guys, or the women who do the makeup and things like that. People are stunningly good looking all over the place. You'll frequently just be driving around and just see a person and you'll be like, that is a person who belongs in advertisements.
Yeah, you'll just see at your coffee shop, my barista is drop dead gorgeous model who's, having a little dip in work right now, or oh, that guy who worked on my car, was in Melrose Place, or just it's just very, very funny. And I think part of why people are good looking is, you can move here to be professionally good looking, but I think there is such a big emphasis on health and fitness down here, right? The acai bowls, the gluten-free stuff, the running on the beach, right? There is this sort of culture of be healthy, be your best you in Los Angeles.
The Hailey Bieber skin smoothie, lotions are at an all-time high down here. There's many creams.
But there's a lot of transplants, right? A lot of people move here and then kind of buy into sort of the ideals of the city. And then I think, you have a lot of these beach communities where people are very, very laid back. I think, as you get more into San Diego, I think, you can certainly have political differences with some of the people in San Diego.
Depending
where on
orientation,
the spectrum you are. But San Diego, too, skews a little older, right? There's a lot more older retirees. There's, I think the military bases there as well. So it's more of that crowd as well. But I think, on the more bad side of the spectrum of people in Southern California, particularly in Los Angeles, there's, and a critique, we've talked about and heard from other people, is there's this sense that when people have interactions here, it can sometimes be difficult to gauge if it's a genuine interaction or someone's trying to network, right? And that can be a little frustrating if you're moving to a new city and you're trying to make friends or you're trying to date and, all these things. And you're just boy, they're really treating me coldly because I don't drive a certain car or I don't have a certain job, or oh, things are going well in my career. Why is everyone reaching out to me all of a sudden, right? That, there's that side of it too.
I think it's also bred by the inconvenience of Los Angeles. A lot of stuff is very far apart, and you pretty much have to get everywhere by car, and driving in a car means that you are going to be in the world famous traffic. And so if you are going to be meeting up with somebody, it's a commitment that you have to make. And I think part of that leads to there's this lack of maybe oh, I was just walking down the street and I saw so-and-so, where there's maybe more of these pedestrian type cities, such as a New York or a San Francisco that's a bit more dense. Los Angeles, you pretty much are seeing people on purpose. And I think too that can lead to a bit of this fake hey, we're totally going to meet up later. We're absolutely going to do that thing that we talked about. And I think a lot of people really enjoy making plans, but not
Yes,
necessarily
yes.
following through on those plans because the plans are hard to follow through on. And I think also there's this nature of Los Angeles, particularly in the film and television industry. Things move at a fairly glacial pace, particularly if you're not hot, if you're not like got all the eyes of the world on you.
Right.
And I think that there's this sad tendency for emails to go just completely unanswered, or people will be out of contact with you for 3 months and then get back in contact with you. And there's this, it's not necessarily bad. And I think part of it too is just like, there isn't like, people aren't just who you're trying to make a business deal with or trying to make something happen in a career sense. Aren't be like, hey, nothing going on here, but hope you're doing well. Like those sorts
Well,
of things.
you know, we work as substitute teachers, so we see a different side of Los Angeles where we're meeting very much salt of the earth, working class people, right? And then we contrast that with the neighborhood we live in, where oftentimes the people walking around, you know, we're in Los Feliz, a lot of the people walking around at the coffee shops and stuff, it's very popular, it's very Instagrammable. It just seems like a lot of the people are in costume most of the time.
Yeah.
And it's like, ooh, I'm kind of going for like, I'm going to the coffee shop. I'm kind of going for fireman chic. And then my girlfriend is going for kind of an Elvira thing. And it's just like, is this really like how you dress, or are you just kind of trying to be seen, right?
I'm wearing clothes that a painter would feel comfortable in, but my job is sending emails.
Right.
I think that you can feel a perhaps bit of people putting on a character and in costume, as you said. But at the same time, too, I think you could say that there is a positive side of that. It's like, I would say some of the ways that people behave in Los Angeles, if you behaved that way in another city, you would be on the receiving end of some intolerant behavior.
Right.
And it is, in a way, nice that you can come to Los Angeles and you can be who you want to be, because people, there's this, it's hard to say if it's tolerance or just indifference.
Yes. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Well, let me ask you this. We talked about how NorCal's god is Guy Fieri. Who would you say is sort of the god of Southern California?
Well, the guy who was born in Los Angeles and, you know, is the king of it still, you know, Leo DiCaprio.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's good. High value on the exterior when he was younger. He's looking a little more Jack Nicholson-ish these days with the thinning hair and a bit of a gut. I think, too...
Valued for how fake he can be.
right, and superficial with who he dates and stuff. But I think, you know, another god, obviously, you know, you drive around Los Angeles anywhere, you're going to see murals of Kobe Bryant. And I think Kobe sort of speaks to his Mamba mentality and the maniacal competitiveness and maniacal hardworking, you know, attitude that he had. I think it speaks a lot to people in Los Angeles who, you know, come from immigrant backgrounds or come from very poor socioeconomic backgrounds and work really, really hard in advance in the entertainment industry or just in other industries too, right? A lot of people come here with a dream and they, you know, it's the American dream, the California dream, where you can work so hard and achieve whatever you want to achieve.
And people forget this, but Kobe was not an immediate success when he came to Los Angeles. He was really trying too hard to do too much. And I think that is something that people who come to Los Angeles relate to as well. And obviously had some pretty major setbacks in doing some, you know, illegal acts and also not getting along well with a highly talented collaborator. But eventually he, you know, got his life in order. And I think he is really an encapsulation of that Los Angeles dream of when he finally won those 2 championships with the right type of people around him. I think that's what everybody in Los Angeles wants, to be able to hold up a golden trophy with collaborators that you really enjoy all around you.
All right, well, let's talk winners. Who do you got? NorCal versus SoCal in terms of the people.
I will say I'll split my vote again.
Are you going to half and half it?
Since
Oh my
you
goodness.
introduced this concept,
Wow.
I will say I like the good of NorCal better and the bad of SoCal better.
Okay, all right. We're getting a split vote. Sorry, Will, we're making you do some math here after a long day.
Basically a no vote, I guess. In a way,
Yeah, it's almost-
it adds to the points.
Yeah,
we want
that's the
points.
I'm going to actually plant a flag in the sand here. I'm going to give my full point to Northern California. I really just think I enjoy the folks in Northern California. I'm really just viewing this on, I'm going out for a walk on the street. Who's going to just have AirPods in and ignore me, and who's gonna say howdy if I say hi? And I just kind of prefer the howdy. So I'm gonna give that to NorCal. Okay, let's move on to the next category, and we'll those of you keeping score at home, you can compare notes later in the podcast when we reveal. And also, if you are keeping score at home, get a hobby. All right, industries. That's our next category, industries. So we're comparing the industries of NorCal versus SoCal. So NorCal, I think it kind of comes down to two major industries, and I think they are tech and government. I think Sacramento is the government, and then Bay Area is kind of tech. And as you mentioned with tech, Apple, Google, Salesforce, Facebook, Meta, whatever the hell it's called now, these were people who pitched themselves as, oh, I am going to save the world. And now we have seen this quote unquote dream kind of rot in the sun, right?
Yeah, it is kind of funny that it basically is like our goal is to bring people together.
Right.
And now it's like, oh God, we brought people together.
Right. And then I think, we talked enough about tech. I think if we want to look at government a bit, California, very liberal, but I think so many people now associate California government with Gavin Newsom, and I think he is just a perfect poster child for current California government, where, again, polished exterior, sometimes we'll say the right thing, but there's a level of hypocrisy. There's a level of sleaziness with the slicked hair, with the, going to the French Laundry.
Cheating on his
Right.
campaign manager's wife.
Yeah, exactly. And so I think there is this distrust of okay, well, he's saying he wants to do the right thing, and he's pretending that this is what he wants, but what's really going on? Is he really so much better than the rest of us? And I think people kind of, for goodness sake, we mentioned the French Laundry. We forgot to mention it in our food section. Just another reason why NorCal has better food. But one of the world's great restaurants. Not that we've ever gone. Big price tag. But Gavin, get us out there. But yeah, I think there is this sense of just people resenting a bit the politics as it is currently in California.
Yeah, I think that there's a feeling that Gavin Newsom thinks he's better than you.
Yes.
And it's like, you think you're better than me? That's the least thing that people like.
And to be fair, homelessness is still an issue in a lot of cities in California. And, we've talked about our whole lifetime, they've talked about a high-speed rail that's going to unify NorCal and SoCal. And have they even laid down a single foot of track yet?
They have, but it goes nowhere. I think, the main thing that people lobby as a critique, and rightly so, at the government, and particularly at liberal governments, is you guys just waste money and you talk a big game, but where's all the money going? Where's all the effects of that money supposed to be? And there's been so much money spent on homelessness, and the problem seems to get worse and worse for not only just for everybody. I mean, the people who are, unhoused and, living rough and living unsheltered, it's really, really hard to see, I think. And that is a sad reality of living in California as well.
To sort of place a bridge between NorCal and SoCal, a really underappreciated part of the workforce is the farm labor and just anyone who's involved in agriculture and the food service industry. And that's what really pisses me off when there's anti-Hispanic sentiment in the United States, where it's just you and I every day working as substitute teachers, our whole life have been surrounded by people who are Hispanic, who are vital to the country, who are great friends of ours, who just the entire state and entire nation would fall apart without. So I think, especially as guys grow up in California, that sort of sentiment always really pisses us off.
Yeah, I think you grow up with lots of people who've come from either Mexico or Latin America, and you're just I've learned a lot from that restaurant I worked in when I was a kid. A lot of guys in there showed me how to be a man. You go into these schools and you have, you're often the one white guy on campus. You're not made to feel uncomfortable. They're helping you out. They're trying to, make sure that these kids get the education that they deserve. And I think part of what's just so beautiful about working as a substitute teacher and the idea of just public education in general is that you can see people from all of these different corners of the earth, and particularly children who are, innocent and, deserving of the best because they haven't done anything wrong to deserve it. And you'll see kids who have just come from Russia and Mexico playing together, even though they don't speak the same language at all. And there's some really, really just, I think it's lost in California, as it's talked about, and we've got a little bit off topic, but as politics, the California's place in politics, I think, really obscures a lot of people who do a lot of the hard work for this nation.
Absolutely. All right, so let's look at Southern California. In terms of their industries, it's mostly film and TV. I think, Los Angeles is the home of film and television, Hollywood. And, funny backstory, when we drive Mulholland Drive or we kind of read those plaques that overlook Los Angeles, LA was, I think the Universal Studios was basically like a chicken farm initially, right? It was just kind of like podunk, farmland.
Well, the guy was just like,
ago.
well, I'm making pretty good money on chickens, but let's see what this new film thing they're talking about is.
And 1 in 5 people, I believe, is the number work in the entertainment industry. And there's so many ancillary jobs in the entertainment industry. It's not just actors, directors, writers, models, etc. There's people who work in, the financial side of things, the marketing side of
lighting,
things.
costuming, grip, set building, all sorts of different aspects. I mean, basically being on a set is almost like being at a rocket launch.
Yeah.
And when the director says action, there are so many different people doing their jobs at the same time that really makes it a cool place to be. If you get on these sets, as I've been on a few times, it's just cool. You're basically thrust into close proximity with roughly 50 to 90 or even down to like 12 or sometimes even like 5 people, but you're just hanging around these people in close proximities for like 12 hours a day. And then at the end of the day, you may not see them again. Or people who work in the industry, more often, you'll maybe see them 2 or 3 months down the line or something like that. And there's really like these cool friendships, I think, that develop out of that. It's a very interesting, unique business. And I mean, the main thing that it's about is almost like bringing dreams into reality. Like every single, even the cheapest commercial you've ever seen is somebody's idea that existed in the ether and then is trying to be put into existence.
Yeah, it's tough. There's, film incentives now outside of Los Angeles, and there's less filming here in Los Angeles. But yeah, it is incredible, especially if you've been on set and witnessed that sort of stuff. And we moved down here. We were seduced by the magic, by the proverbial gold mines that are Los Angeles, and the streets here, they're full of broken dreams and overnight sensations, right? There is that contrast that's a little heartbreaking, but also very motivating. And, I think outside film and TV, we mentioned the military bases in San Diego. Tourism obviously is huge. People come from all over the world to come to Los Angeles and San Diego and the beaches and everything. And then real estate's just huge too, Real estate is massive. There are so many suburban developments in between Los Angeles and San Diego, and it's just desert and cyber trucks and massive houses, and it is just incredible that it's just like, man, California's big, but we're starting to fill it in. Real estate is so huge, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, let's look at a winner for this category, industries. Do you have a winner for NorCal or a winner for SoCal?
I'll give it to SoCal.
I think I'm going to join you with that. So, Will, that'll be 2 points for SoCal in the industries. No halves, we promise. Whole numbers, sir. We know fractions make you a little dizzy.
I mean, it's the reason we're down here, essentially, is what we're trying to do with that. And I think you can tell yourself as somebody who's in Northern California that I can still make this happen up here. But I will say that there is this provinciality about Los Angeles that it does seem like if you're not doing it here, people aren't looking to pay attention elsewhere because there's so many different things that are happening here.
Last category when we come back. All right, last category, sports. We're really running the gauntlet of all our favorite categories. That's the beauty of the Flynn Brothers podcast. We talk about a lot of different things, right? We're sort of these bon vivants, these Renaissance man. We know all sorts of things about all sorts of stuff.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, God, are the mics on? This is how we talk off mic. All right, let's get to it. Okay, NorCal sports. We're going to kind of divide it into talking about the champs and then kind of the seller teams historically, right? So the champions of Northern California, you got the Golden State Warriors, who, have had an iconic run from sort of the mid 2010s into the early 2020s and are, kind of have new life now with
Still
Jimmy
hanging
Butler.
on.
Yeah. But Steph Curry, icon of Northern California. And then you got the San Francisco 49ers, historically great football team with Jerry Rice and Joe Montana, Steve Young, and then even now they're great with Brock Purdy and Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, pretty awesome run that they had, although it does seem like perhaps it's crested and on the downslope. They're kind of the most cursed great team. Like they get so close in modern times and just haven't quite been able to put it all together.
But historically have been very good.
Yes, and then of course there's the Giants.
The Giants,
who are sort of the opposite of the Niners in that they have not always had the most talent, but they just got the magic about them. Like they ran off three.
I think it was 3 and 5 years in the early 2010s.
And they didn't have any really, really super dominant star. I mean, maybe Buster Posey was the closest thing that you would say there, but it was just these really well balanced teams that got hot at the right time and great ballpark. One of the best.
One thing about the Warriors that is interesting, kind of a more negative side, is Steph's great, but criticism now from a lot of parents and a lot of NBA players is every kid now tries to shoot three-pointers like Steph, and a lot of people have kind of forgotten the rules of team basketball and playing the right way, and everyone's kind of trying to do ISOs and step backs and threes. And I think even from the business side of it, when Kevin Durant left the OKC Thunder and joined the Warriors, it left a bad taste in people's mouths. And when the Warriors went to 3 straight finals, and the first 2 they won, and they more or less swept the Cavaliers. It just was seen as competitively not very interesting.
Which is funny because Steph is sort of an underdog type player is how he's seen. You could say that, son of an NBA player, not exactly the biggest underdog you've ever heard of. And he also, I think, too, is a very selfless player, perhaps the most selfless superstar that we've had. Not every player would have been cool with bringing in an arguably better player than himself to the team who he's going to have to sacrifice touches to. And lots of kids, they jack up 3-point shots. But what Steph, I think, is perhaps most known for by true aficionados of the sport is the off-ball movement and how much he is running around thanklessly, which opens up the offense for everyone else on the team.
In terms of cardio, the best conditioned NBA player of all time, you think?
Has to be,
right?
I mean, just unreal. And he's also went from being very spindly to jacked.
Yeah, he's jacked.
He is huge now. His shoulders and arms are crazy.
All right, let's talk about some of the cursed teams of NorCal. We have our Sacramento Kings, who, have been cursed for as long as we've been alive, and frankly, for a decade or so before that. They've constantly been faced with threats of relocation. That was, a big part of our childhood. And even now, I'm sure we'll get into a big Kings podcast later down the line. But, after kind of the Beam team success and going to the playoffs, we seem to be kind of headed back downhill.
Yeah. And on a similar note, you have the A's, who are now playing in Sacramento for a couple of years before they go to Vegas, where they will join the Oakland Raiders. And it's kind of a sad story with Oakland there, who once had 3 teams because the Warriors used to play in Oakland, and now they have no teams from the major professional sports despite being a rabid city. I mean, I think something that we forget about is when the Warriors first started getting good, everybody loved the Warriors because the Oakland fan base had been so loyal through so many terrible, terrible years. And have now just really been, kicked in the teeth.
And their football team, the Raiders, which had gone down to Los Angeles, then came back, are now in Las Vegas. Tom Brady co-owns them. And they too are a bit of a cursed team. They had a good run with Madden, I think, as their coach back in the 70s, it might have been. They won a Super Bowl. And
they had Gruden in there for a good year. But
then he left and beat the Raiders with the Buccaneers in the Super Bowl. I actually think the Raiders traded him to the Buccaneers. But
I think they're kind of more seen just because of their color scheme and the just win baby of Al Davis. Culturally relevant, but sort of irrelevant in terms of the league.
Well, let's move to Southern California. The champs, certainly the Los Angeles Lakers, who have won 17 NBA championships, although some of them were in Minneapolis. A significant number, he says. Incredible fan base. I think because there's so many celebrities courtside, and because, as we've talked about, there's this generalization of Los Angeles that people are very superficial. I will say, they got some good basketball fans. Like the people in LA really care about the Lakers.
Totally. And the atmosphere in Staples Center, which you can see on television, is unlike any other. If somebody's cooking or some really great performance is going, the roar of the crowd is different.
Particularly now that Luka Doncic is on the team. With LeBron, there's always been this kind of arm's distance embrace of him. He won the title when the Lakers were in the bubble, so they didn't get to have a parade. And then, LeBron had the best part of his career with other teams. And, he's been criticized as kind of being the shadow GM a lot of the time. Whereas Doncic comes over, he's like, 26? So he's still pretty young. So I think the Lakers feel like, oh my God, we're like helping raise this guy up just as he enters his prime. And to be frank, like the cheering for Doncic is almost like a decibel higher than the cheering for LeBron. And I think part of it is the style of play. LeBron's more team-oriented, whereas Doncic can kind of thrill you with offensive highlights.
Yeah, very similar to Kobe, the one-on-one brilliance of it. And I think, too, there is this sort of like, whereas LeBron, he's like this, Los Angeles is like his third or fourth wife. Look, it's still special or whatever. Whereas Luka was like, he had a really like beautiful, it seemed like naive relationship that he was just jilted for. And here's Los Angeles. Come over here, Luka. They weren't treating you right. We'll show you a good time. Here, look at the ocean. Have this fresh fish.
And perhaps the only other team that's a hotter ticket than the Lakers is the LA Dodgers. They are awesome, fresh off a World Series. They have Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani and are just really, really fun to watch. It's been a while since we've sought out teams to look for and just throw on a baseball game, but anytime the Dodgers are on, we're putting them on.
Yeah, stacked top to bottom. And I think another fan base that is absolutely rabid.
Yes. Oh, it's unbelievable. You go to a Dodger game, and I got a bit of Dodgers gear. Growing up, we were kind of more A's, Giants fans. We were never huge, rabid baseball guys. But I would never dare wear a Giants hat in Dodger Stadium. And every single person in Dodger Stadium has a Dodger jersey, man. Every single one has a blue LA Dodgers cap and a jersey, a beautiful, stitched, authentic jersey. I mean, it is incredible. The people just bleed blue. They love the Dodgers.
True. All over the city, too. Like, that's a thing that really brings the city together, I think, is cool about the Lakers and the Dodgers in particular, that it is this far-flung city that is really, really spread out. But that is something that I think if you are a person who likes sports and you can, hang for a few minutes talking about the Dodgers or Lakers, you can have a conversation with a lot of people in LA.
An honorable mention, which I think is kind of in between a championship team and a cursed team, is the LA Rams. They, of course, came from St. Louis. There is this weird thing with, and we'll get to the Chargers later, but we mentioned the Raiders and just like these teams that have kind of come in and out of Los Angeles. That to me feels a little odd. Like it's hard as an LA person to claim all of these teams if they just, you kind of don't know if they're going to stay or they're going to go. It like if you were a Raiders fan, living in LA and then they're gone, it's just like, am I really going to let myself get psyched up for the Rams and the Chargers? But the Rams, they won the Super Bowl, I think back in 2020, and they've stayed pretty good. I think Sean McVay is a very good coach, and they've stayed good. Like even when it seems like they're gonna tank, right? They have seemed like a good team. And I think the one tough thing is they share a stadium with the Chargers, which came from San Diego, so they had less of a trip to make. But both teams are blue. The LA crowd doesn't really embrace either of them. If they're playing the San Francisco 49ers, then you're going to see a lot of red in the crowd and people are going to make the trip. So I don't know. Those two teams, the Rams are obviously fared historically in LA a little better than the Chargers so far. But yeah, still there's a bit of an arm's distance embrace from the people of LA.
Yeah, and they had been here for years and years before going to St. Louis and then coming back as well, which I think gives them a little bit more currency of authenticity versus the Chargers, which had a very good, strong fan base in San Diego. And I think too, both of these teams, you can chalk up the reason why they moved back to LA as it is financially better. It makes you more money if you own a team in Los Angeles versus San Diego or St. Louis, which anytime money enters the equation with sports, it takes away some of the magic.
100%. In anything, frankly. Chargers, I guess you'd kind of consider them a cursed team, but they're kind of turning it around, and they were pretty fun for some years when they were in San Diego.
Yeah, but they just are perennial playoff disappointments, always have so much talent and just can never put it together gruesome injury luck, etc.
Well, even more cursed is the Clippers. The closest they've come to relevance was sort of in the early to mid 2010s when they had Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and but frankly couldn't even crack the second round. They blew 2-3-1 leads in the playoffs, and were just a team that was disjointed, rocked by the Donald Sterling scandal, and just have always sort of been a cursed team, almost the poster child for cursed teams.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you say the Clippers to an NBA fan, and it's like, ugh.
Beetlejuice.
They are changing it around. I mean, they're owned by the richest guy who owns a team in the NBA, and the Intuit Dome, by all accounts, is quite the place to see a game. Unlike the Anaheim Angels, who are just completely in the absolute shadow of the Dodgers.
More cursed than the Clippers, the Angels, would you say?
I mean, to have two of the all-time greatest players in baseball history and not even make the playoffs with them is pretty stunning.
Maybe they made it once, didn't they?
With Trout, but not with Ohtani.
Not with both. Oh, boy. Oh, that's sobering.
That'll sober you up.
Sobering, boy. All right, well, time to declare a winner in terms of sports, NorCal or SoCal. Who you got?
Oh, God.
I'm asking a Kings fan. What do I expect to hear?
I have to. I'd say I'm not going to split my point. My whole point goes to Northern California, but I think you would have to say that Southern California has a couple of the sexier franchises.
I think I have to be a little more unbiased here and split my vote. So I'm going to give half to Northern California. That's for the Kings, baby. I love the Kings, but I don't love the Warriors fans. I know a lot of Sacramento Kings fans. I know they just started being Warriors fans when Steph Curry came around. I know you. I got you down on a list. I know your name. I know your family. And then, I got, to be frank and just objective, like, the Lakers and Dodgers are just prestige franchises, and the Dodgers are white hot, and the Lakers, I mean, goodness, this year, next year, potentially, they have a shot at a title.
5 years. They're just 7 years. As long as they have Luka Doncic, they're going to be a relevant team.
So it's pretty incredible. Okay, all right. I split my vote again. I'm naughty. I don't know what it is. I haven't been eating dessert as frequently, so maybe I'm looking for my sweet treats wherever I can get them. But let's go ahead and add up the totals, whatever the hell that just meant. And Will, why don't you let us know? You got it written down here in your notebook. We have, Northern California has 6.5 points. Southern California, 3.5 points.
Sounds right to me. I think I definitely skewed things towards Northern California. It's I think as much as I like being down in Southern California and have enjoyed my time here, I'm just a NorCal guy through and through, and I couldn't see it lose yet again to Southern California.
You can take the brothers out of NorCal, but you can't take the NorCal out of the brothers. So, unlike our Bourdain versus Fieri podcast, we are declaring a winner other than the audience. It is NorCal. They win.
Woo! Yeah, congratulations.
The
Congratulations,
NorCal
fellow
versus
NorCalian.
SoCal. I will have, Will, can you mail the award to Guy Fieri? He's got a P.O. box in Santa Rosa. I think that would be great if we could do that. All right, we're going to take one last break. When we come back, a fun little game. I am going to give my brother John a California quiz. Okay, time to test John's knowledge of the little California quiz. It's going to be 10 questions, some multiple choice. I'm going to have you list some things. Some will be sort of open-ended. It's going to be a lot of fun. You ready?
I'm ready.
All right. You're sort of a California expert, so I think, I'm going to set the over-under at 6. You think you'll go over or under?
Now that you've said I'm going over.
You got to believe in yourself.
I fancy myself as an expert. We'll see if the humiliation awaits.
All right, here we go. Number 1. Was Rocky Road ice cream invented in NorCal or SoCal?
I'm going to go SoCal.
No. It was NorCal. It was Oakland, California, invented by William Dreyer of Dreyer's Ice Cream. The story is Dreyer invented the flavor in March 1929, and he gave it the name Rocky Road as sort of a nod to the Depression that was ongoing and just
Wow.
sort of the rocky road America had ahead of them.
Yeah.
And he cut up walnuts, marshmallows with his wife's sewing scissors. That sounds like the 20s. And added them to chocolate ice cream. And he had a friend who sort of had this candy creation with the marshmallows and walnuts. So it was kind of copying that. But pretty cool. Pretty cool.
Very cool.
Yeah.
The nice sort of gesture to the American public during the Depression. They were
Absolutely,
coming up with a delicious ice cream flavor based on the crushing
Yes, poverty.
despair
and,
that you feel.
And I think William Dreyer would be happy that nearly a century later I eat a whole tub of it shirtless in my bed most nights.
In his honor.
In his honor, of course. In honor of Bill Dreyer. All right, here we go. Number 2. This is a multiple choice one. Actor Nicolas Cage was born in Southern California, SoCal. Member of the Coppola family, obviously. 3 options here. Was he born in A, La Jolla, B, Long Beach, or C, Montecito?
I'm going to say Long Beach.
Long Beach is your final answer.
Yes.
Ding, ding, ding. That is correct. You got it. Nicolas
Hey.
Cage was born in Long Beach, just like contemporary of his Snoop Dogg. They're very similar guys with
Yeah.
very similar careers. Okay, good.
I wonder if they've ever crossed paths. They
I
must
bet
have.
so. Hey, what's up? I'm trying to do an impression. Here we go. Let me try. Who should I do first? Nick Cage or Snoop?
Who were you doing there?
I don't know. Both kind of. I combined them. Nice to meet you, Snoop Dogg. All right,
Hey.
that's enough. Okay, that was.
Hey, Nick.
Yeah, good. Yeah, good. Right down the middle. All right, here we go. Number 3. I mentioned California burritos, the burritos with French fries, which are wonderful. I showed my girlfriend's dad a California burrito, and he was a little unsure about visiting California, but he had one of those, and he's like, this state ain't too bad. But here we go. Here's a California burrito question for you. What meat is traditionally in a California burrito?
Carne asada.
Ding, ding, ding. That is correct. Now, I will sometimes, if I'm trying to be a little lighter, I'll get a little grilled chicken in it, you know,
Sure.
but carne asada.
That's a very responsible choice for you when you're having a cheese and fries loaded burrito.
Thank you, buddy. It usually has a little sour cream, little guac, little
Yeah.
pico de gallo. For those who don't know what a California burrito is, it's really wonderful. You should have one.
It's kind of a misnomer because you would think a California burrito would be like healthier, like it would be with fish.
bean sprouts and cod or whatever.
Instead, it's just the biggest gut bomb you can imagine.
All right, here we go. Number 4. Doing okay so far. All right, so California in its history has had 5 capitals.
Wow.
One of which is Sacramento, obviously, which is the current capital. Now, can you please name 2 of the other capitals of California? Besides Sacramento, of course.
Are we taking this all the way back to
Pre-California joining the states. Yeah, so this is like almost back to like late 1700s, I think, like
Okay.
early 1800s and stuff. So you got 4 options, and I just need 2 of them.
okay? How many guesses do I get?
If you get 2 out of 3, I'll count it.
All right,
Yeah.
San Jose.
San Jose is one of them. That is correct. San Jose is one of them.
Los Angeles.
Incorrect.
San Fran.
Incorrect.
Wow.
The other options are Monterey, Vallejo, and Benicia. I
Wow.
don't even know where Benicia is. You know, Will, I'm going to go ahead. Let's give him half a point on that. Is that okay if we give him a half a point? I know we don't typically do this. Oh, what? We've been doing it all episode? Oh, okay. Well, what can you do?
I was supposed to get 2. I got 1.
Yeah,
That
I'll
makes
give you a
sense.
half a point.
Yeah.
I'll give you a half a point. That might help with the over-under. We got a lot of folks in Vegas,
Oh, yeah.
fingers crossed,
Yeah.
clutching their...
FanDuel.
yeah.
Biting their nails.
All right, here we go. Number 5. What year was California admitted as a state to the United States of America? I need the exact year on this one.
1850.
That is correct. Well done. Very good. It's a nice, beautiful round number,
Do
the
you-
half-century mark.
How about this?
Oh,
John's
sure.
brief history of California's introduction to the nation. The reason California was fast-tracked into being in the nation is because the Union was heavily, heavily in debt after the Civil War. 1850 is the year after 1849, the year gold was discovered in California.
Wow.
Desperately needing money, the Union was like, come on in, even though there was like a
Right.
huge chunk of land in between the rest
Right.
of the Union and
Hold
California.
on, though. You said after the Civil War. The Civil War is the 1860s.
Holy cow, I must be really wrong. They were in debt for some
They
reason.
were in debt.
They're in debt
Perhaps
for
not the
some
Civil
war.
War.
Not
We
the
gotta
Civil War.
we gotta put a little asterisk
I
on
got
your
over
brief
my
history.
skis there.
You got over your skis.
I
Well, that was
probably-
good.
maybe
They
we
were
gotta
in
look it
debt.
up.
They were in debt.
The Union was in debt.
Tell you what, if anyone submits an email, we'll run a retraction. Okay, cool. All right, number 6. Here we go. Was Trader Joe's, the grocery store, founded in NorCal or SoCal?
SoCal.
That is correct. It was, do you know what city? A little east of us.
East is away from the ocean. Okay. Pasadena?
There you go.
I
Pasadena,
was-
1967, the hippie heyday. Good job, Joe.
Yeah.
All right, good. Very good. He's doing pretty well so far. How many points does he have? 4.5 so far. Wonderful. Okay, good. All right, and you wanted to get, you got to get a couple more here to get over that
I'm
6.
going to do my best.
Here we go. Number 7. What is the California state motto?
Eureka?
Ding, ding, ding. You got it, buddy. Very good. Eureka, which means I found it. Again, traced back to the gold rush. Most of California things are traced back to the gold rush. Don't you find that to be so?
I do find that to be so.
All right, I'm going to give you a hard one here. I
Okay.
think you can do it, though, if you just think logically. Number 8. I need you to list me in order the top 5 most populated cities in California. I need you to do it in order.
Good one.
Number 1.
Number 1 is Los Angeles.
That is correct. 3.8 million people.
Number 2 is San Diego.
That is correct. San Diego, 1.4 million people.
Number 3, I believe, is San Jose.
That is correct. 970,000 people.
Number 4, it must be San Francisco.
Correct. 810,000 people. Can you get number 5?
I'm tempted to say Sacramento, but I don't think that is right. I'm also tempted to say Oakland, but I'm kind of torn. I'd say I'm torn between Oakland. No. I think I've got it. Bakersfield?
None of the 3 you have mentioned
Okay.
are correct. I will give you one last guess at the 5th most populated city.
Populated city. Is it Stockton or Fresno, I feel like?
You're going to have to pick one, sir.
Wow. Which one is bigger? I think it's Fresno.
Fresno is correct. He got a top 5 with a little boost from his buddy Jim. Very good. L.A., San Diego, San Jose, San Francisco, and Fresno. Sacramento being number 6.
Wow.
Very good. Fresno, 545,000. Sacramento, 525,000. Folks, in Sacramento, we got to start cranking out kids. We got to
Yeah.
get into that top 5 spot. start counting your dead
We don't want-
relatives on the census.
I don't
Let's
want
go.
anyone moving to Sacramento. I want more kids.
yeah. All right, cool. Here we go. Number 9. Here's a really fun one. So, former NBA player Matt Barnes has played on all 4 California NBA teams:
Wow.
the Clippers, the Lakers, the Warriors, and the Kings. Listen to this. 3 of the teams he has played for twice.
Wow.
What is the one team he did not play for twice? The one California NBA team he did not play for twice.
Definitely played for the Warriors twice. Definitely played for the Clippers twice. I think he played for the Lakers only once.
Lakers is your
Yeah.
yes? That is correct. The Lakers. Yes, he was on the Kings
I think,
twice as
yeah.
well.
Yeah,
Very
I
good,
think I
man.
remember
Very, very good. All right, fun one to end it. Here we go. Number 10, the final question of the California quiz. What animal was elected mayor of Sonol, California in 1981? Is it A, Bosco the dog, B, Peaches the tabby cat, or C, Paisley the horse? Do you need to hear the options again?
I definitely do.
The options are A, Bosco the dog, B, Peaches the tabby cat, or C, Paisley the horse. Which of these animals was elected mayor of Sonol back in the early 80s?
And am I correct in assuming that you have invented the other 2 names?
yes, one is the correct answer. The other 2 are a wonderfully wicked fiction from the mind of Jim Flynn.
Can you tell me, the city one more time?
Sonol, California.
Sonol. See, I don't know much about Sonol.
I don't really even know where it is, frankly.
If I were to guess,
Big state we got here.
I'm going to go with Paisley the horse.
Paisley the horse. Sadly, you have fallen victim to the wonderfully wicked fiction of your brother. The correct answer is Bosco the dog. They have a little statue of him. They, I believe he was a joke write-in candidate that a few too many citizens did, and he was the honorary mayor. And
I wonder what his tax policy was like.
Yeah, it was. He had a pretty strict no cats policy.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
He was always shaking people down to get some bones.
Well, buddy, the scores are in, and you got a 7.5 out of 10. So that's wonderful. Good job,
great.
buddy. Good job.
Though, you know, I will say thank you very much. I will say that when you originated this California quiz, I was expecting to have to name the Big Four. Of the
Big Four,
continental or the transcontinental railroad.
Oh yes, that's a good one. Yeah. I'll take a stab at it. Maybe you'll help me.
That at you.
I believe Stanford is one.
Yep.
Do you know them off the top of your head? You know them all?
I know two.
Oh, geez. Well, we're not going to get this. Stanford, maybe Brannon.
Crocker,
definitely one.
Sam Brannon, I think, might be one too.
Let's see here. We're doing a little research on the fly. Bear with us, folks. All right, I got it. We got Collis P. Huntington, Leland Stanford, Mark Hopkins, and Charles Crocker.
There you go.
So I knew Stanford, you knew Crocker. Hopkins and Huntington, a little tougher, but
Hopkins not as much named after him.
Now Huntington, I assume, is the library,
Absolutely.
right down here in Pasadena, as the aforementioned Pasadena. Well, that was wonderful. Thanks for partaking in the California quiz. That was great.
Thanks for stretching my mind with your wicked ways.
7.5 out of 10. That's a C, baby. C's get degrees.
Yeah. Thank goodness this isn't going on my transcript.
Yeah. Well. We'll get it expunged. All right, please subscribe, comment, and leave a rating. Send questions, comments, or big idea suggestions to our business email, flynnbrospod@gmail.com. Thank you to our producer and math wizard, Will Slade. And we'll see you next time on the Flynn Brothers podcast. Take care, buddy.
You take care, buddy.